Hi everyone, Ian here. I wanted to do an update video on the dynamic REST package. There have been a couple of really big changes. I wanted to go over those with you. This is actually probably going to be two videos. I'll touch briefly on the major changes at the beginning of this one. So let's get started with that. The biggest change is that you can now do updates. So originally dynamic REST was written to only retrieve data, but I've actually gone ahead and put in the ability to update queries from within dynamic REST using a special parameter. Okay, I'll explain how that works in a little bit more detail later. One of the other things that I've enabled is automatic recompiling. So now when you change or add a query field, it will go ahead and it will recompile the SQL that's used automatically. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that briefly. So we are looking at an account here, and I'm just going to add the owner ID. Well, let's add the owner name. Okay, and we'll call that, we'll alias that to owner name. So one of the things to notice here is that there's this new checkbox called is updatable, and again I'll explain that a little bit later. So what you saw is you saw me add a new query field, but I didn't hit recompile. However, if you go down here and look at the SQL, you can see that it's already been included. So that removes one of those annoying steps where you had to constantly recompile everything. It does all of the recompilation and validation automatically. So in fact, if this doesn't actually exist as a field, it'll give me an error message that says no such column name2 on entity user. All right. So it'll do that validation and that recompilation automatically. So that's one of the changes, is the automatic recompilation. The other change I want to discuss before I get into updating is default values for constraints. So if we look at the created date field here, a couple of things that we can do now. This wasn't actually working before, so this is a big improvement. We could always do constraints on text fields, but constraints on date fields was broken because the parsing code wasn't working properly. I fixed it, and so now you can do things like pass in a URL parameter, in this case we'll call it created date min, and pass in a date value, and that will get compared in the SQL. We also have the ability to set default values. So in the case you want to set up a parameter that somebody could use but you don't necessarily want to require them to use, you can put a default value, and then all the results will use the default value if there's nothing being passed in. If there is something being passed in, that will override whatever the default value is. Let's go back to the query and look at something else that we can do. So on the last modified date, I have a special default value here called last year. Now this is actually coming from the date literal format documentation. Whoops, in Salesforce. Let's close that out here. So Salesforce has support for all of these different date literals that you can use. Now I support, as of this release, everything except for the special cases down here where we say last n days or last n quarters. Those are not supported right now. But the rest of them are, so you can put in these as default values, and you can pass them in on the URL bar if you want as well. That provides a really easy way to create a query that maybe a partner can use that will automatically find all the opportunities that have been updated or modified within, say, the last fiscal quarter. And they can just get a report. They don't ever have to change the dates manually that they put in. It just defaults to the last fiscal quarter. So that's pretty useful. Okay, so I'm starting to run out of time on this first video. The updating is very important, so I do want to cover that. I will do that in the second video, which follows right now.